When Melek asked me to come and give a talk about, to the Turkish Women's International Network about entrepreneurship, the answer was a resounding yes. Not only because do I absolutely adore Melek, but for the past 5 years, that's what I've done. I travel around the world and I tell stories about the entrepreneurs that I meet. I talked a little bit about that before. I worked for Endeavor for the past 5 years, talking about the entrepreneurs that we support there, but then also entrepreneurs that I've come across. And Melek said, no, 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 no. I don't want you to tell the stories of other entrepreneurs. I want you to tell your story. And I said, but I'm not an entrepreneur, Melek. And she said, sure you are. And I thought about it for a little while, and I said, no, I really don't think so. I don't think I'm an entrepreneur. And so she said, well, what are you then? My first reaction is, well, I'm a storyteller, and that's what I do. And because Melek knows how much this means to me, there was silence. There was, there was no pushback. I knew that wasn't a satisfactory answer, and I said, oh, come on, Melek. I'm a nomad. I'm a Turk. I'm true to the Turkish image of being a nomad. I travel around the world, and this is what I do. I tell people stories. And so she said, okay, she said, you can be a nomad, but I think that you're an entrepreneur, and I think that you should come and you should tell your story. And when she said, oh, she said, I think that you're an entrepreneur just like the Turks are. And that actually, I had to stop and think, and I thought, the Turks as entrepreneurs. I'd always thought of the Turks as nomads, and all the images of kind of Lawrence Arabia. I know I'm stereotyping, that's really bad, but that's okay because I'm Turkish, I can do that. But the Turk as an entrepreneur, that is something that I hadn't really envisioned. When you think about the Americans, you think, oh, okay, when people say entrepreneurship and you think about America, that makes a lot of sense. You've got a lot of role models that exist in the United States. You've got Michael Dell and Steve Jobs and Oprah, and there are all these figures, but when you're thinking about the Turks, you don't automatically think entrepreneurs. But the more I thought about it, I actually thought, you know what? I think that Melek is right. I think that there's something to this. I think yes, I think Turks are nomads, but I also think they're entrepreneurs. And so I want to take you on just a little, very short journey, not very long, about nomads and entrepreneurs in Turkey, but through my story. And that story starts very much with the question that Melek posed is, what are you then? I appreciated that question, because we don't ask, when we meet one another, we don't ask each other, who are you and what are you interested in? What is the first thing that we ask? When you meet somebody, what do you first ask them? How are you? What do you do? People always say, what do you do? And I think this is a wrong question. I don't think what we do reflects who we are. What we do doesn't necessarily equate into our worldviews and our values. It doesn't really say who we are. I mean, we may have a job that really needs to pay our rent, but it doesn't really encompass who we are. And so I very much appreciated that question. And if you actually think about it, when we talk to children, when we ask them, we don't ask them, what do you want to do when you grow up? We ask children, what do you want to be? We stimulate their imaginations, and we actually ask them to imagine who would they like to be when they grow up. And I think that this is a great question, and I love this question growing up. Because the possibilities were endless. One day I could be a teacher, the next day I could be an Olympian ice skater, another day I could be the president of Turkey. My brother, he wanted to be a mailman. Now delivering the mail is very important. And he would watch my mother every single day. My mother being an immigrant from Turkey, and at the time, mail was really the only connection that she had with her family who were back living in Anatolia. There were no phones, there was certainly no internet, and even if there was an internet, my mother probably wouldn't use it. Mail was her connection, and this was profoundly important So like clockwork, every single day, she would stand by the window and she would wait for the mailman to come. And my brother would watch this and see this, and he would think, wow, this mailman guy, he's pretty important if my mother's stopping what she's doing and he's going to the window. And sometimes my mother would ask my brother, if she had something to do, could you go and wait for the mailman to come? And he would enthusiastically go and wait for the mailman. And this is what he wanted to do when he grew up. He wanted to be the mailman. And when you asked him why do you want to be the mailman? And he says, because it makes people happy. I'm not really sure how that explains why he's a lawyer today. But this actually formulated my worldview of, wow, you know, if you can really tell a lot about a person's life and what their living situation is by asking children, you know, what is it that you want to be when you grow up? And so as I travel around the world, and believe me, I travel around the world a lot. I rack up those frequent flyer miles. I make sure that in addition to all the entrepreneurs that I'm meeting, that I go visit a school, or I'm somewhere where I can actually interact with children, because I really want to know what is the reality here, because I think it's really important. I think children are a reflection of, if they answer what they want to be, it's then you're actually really seeing progress. I know that we see a lot of spreadsheets and a lot of metrics, and I see some of my former colleagues from Endeavor who deal with all sorts of impact measurement. But I don't think there's any more of a true impact measurement than really asking and talking to a child and asking them what they want to be. What they want to be. And so I traveled to Cambodia last year and came across a little girl. She must have been about 8 years old, and I said to her, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she said, I want to be a fashion designer. And that reflected the reality of what's going on in Cambodia today, where textiles are a huge industry. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. She's clearly been exposed to this and understands that this is a big market here in Cambodia, and she wants to design clothes and open up her own shop and do all of these things. In October, I traveled to Pakistan, and I visited a school where I talked to 3 young men, and each of them wanted to go into alternative energy. And when I talked to them about this, I thought this was quite interesting. And as I witnessed, as I was in Pakistan for 10 days, the electricity goes out all the time. And so these kids wanted to invent solutions to Pakistan's electricity problem. And they came up with the most inventive solutions. One of them actually wants to take onions and use onion peels in order to create biomass gasifiers. And I thought, you know, this is absolutely fascinating. Several years ago, I visited Eastern Turkey. I had never been there before. I went to a town on the border of Turkey and Armenia called Kars. It's really in one of the most remote places in Turkey. And I wasn't talking to a child. I was talking to a young man. He must have been about 19 years old. And I'll tell you the story about how I came across this young man. But what he told me he wanted to be absolutely blew my mind. Now, my parents are immigrants from Turkey. I traveled to Turkey as a child, and traveling there, the one thing that all little boys and girls wanted to be in Turkey is they wanted to be doctors. This was the big profession. This was the most prestigious profession that you could be in Turkey. This is what you grew up to be in Turkey, is you grew up to be a doctor. And this young man, 19 years old, said to me, I want to be an inventor. And I thought, we're in the middle of nowhere, and this guy wants to be an inventor, and it just absolutely blew my mind. Now, how did he come to decide he wanted to be an inventor? Well, that story is tied with how I came to Kars. How many of you have read Orhan Pamuk's Snow? Oh, good. I knew this was a good question for this audience. So Orhan Pamuk, who is one of Turkey's most famous writers, not the best, but one of Turkey's most famous writers, wrote a book called Snow, and it takes place in the city called Kars. It's in eastern Turkey. just a summary of the book, the protagonist is a journalist who goes out to the city to investigate a spate of female suicides that have gone on. And he goes to one of the local, because he's a journalist, he goes to one of the local newspapers. It's set in the 21st century. It's set in 2002. And just to give you an idea, if you haven't read the book, Pamuk really wants to give you a sense that this is a place time forgot. And having been there, it really is a place time forgot. We were talking earlier about Istanbul being, the best place to visit and being on economist lists and one of the best places to do business. And it is. It's really cosmopolitan. It's very European. But not all Turkish cities are like that. And Kars is definitely a place that has been forgotten. I landed in the city closest, with the closest airport, which is 3 hours away. And I did the trek just like the protagonist, the character in the book did. So traveled 3 hours in a minibus on a single lane road to Kars. I get to the city. It was late at night, and I checked into this hotel that was probably built in the 1950s sometime, and it probably hasn't been updated or cleaned since the 1950s. And so you walk in, and it's like this communist block, and there's paint peeling, and there are a bunch of, it's like typical. It was like a B movie, and there are all these mustache men smoking cigarettes, and I walk in and I check in and I go up to my room, and I get off the elevator. And in most European buildings, lights aren't on all the time. They actually have figured out efficient energy use, so you have to actually hit a switch in order for the light to go on. So as soon as I got off the elevator, the first thing I noticed, it's dark. So the first thing I noticed is there's a blinking light. And there's a box, and I thought, oh, I know what that is. It's a Wi-Fi box, and I thought, wow, this hotel, it's really falling apart. It's got Wi-Fi. That's pretty impressive. So I go into my room, and I turn on my laptop. That was working, and I get an internet signal, and the internet signal was made possible by AirTies, and AirTies is a company run by Bülent Çelebi, who is an Endeavor entrepreneur. And as I mentioned, I was working at Endeavor at the time, and I got so excited about this because I had been working at Endeavor for a year, and here I was using a product of one of the entrepreneurs we were supporting. I was so excited about it. And go to sleep that night, wake up the next morning, and I go downstairs where this young man is at the front desk. And I'm still excited about the fact that there's Wi-Fi in this place, because this is it's a place, again, that time forgot. And just a place that time forgot. In Pamuk's book, the printing press, the one reason I went to this place is Ka goes to the printing press, and the newspaper is printed on a woodblock bound press. And when I asked him I said to him, that was a brilliant device that you put into your book, just to give you a sense of how backward this place is and how time has forgotten this place. And he said, I didn't make that up. That's actually true. The newspaper is they still line up those blocks, and they print the newspaper on these blocks. And I said, that's impossible. In the 21st century, in the digital age, it is impossible for a newspaper. And he said, no, he said, you should go and see it. And so here I am. I'm standing in front of this desk clerk, knowing I'm excited about the Wi-Fi, knowing that this is where I'm headed to go to the newspaper to go see this woodblock press. And this kid says, yeah, we have Wi-Fi. He said, and you know what the better thing is? He said, the guy who brings us the Wi-Fi, he's a Turk. And I thought, oh my God, he knows this. I can't believe that. And he said, oh yeah, he said his name is Bülent Çelebi, and he runs a company called AirTies. And he says, you know what? He says, this guy worked in Silicon Valley. He said he went to America. He became an American, and he studied engineering. And he came back to Turkey to set this company up. And now there's a technology park outside of Istanbul. And they're inventing things. They're inventing these machines. And they're inventing all sorts of technologies. And they're doing things with mobile phones. And he's talking to me about this with such enthusiasm. And I said, well, is that something you're interested in? He said, that's what I want to do. I want to invent something like this, and I want to study, I want to be an engineer, and I want to invent something like this. And that just blew me away. And it made me realize the power of what Bülent had done. That he not only had created this company, he had left Turkey, he had immigrated to the United States, he studied engineering. He worked in Silicon Valley for a while, he worked in Hong Kong for a while. He learned all of these different things and he built this company, went back to Turkey. And he's now, the effect that he's having is he's inspiring all these different people. And yes, he's an entrepreneur, but he's an entrepreneur only because he's been able to do all these different things as a nomad and bring it back to Turkey and inspire this young man who he's never met into thinking that he can be an inventor. And what that made me realize is that because I'm so interested in development, we talk about the brain drain, and we talk about how that's a bad thing for countries. That made me question whether it is actually bad. If the brain drain is actually taking talent, having them travel around the world with this concept of being a nomad, and having them understand where ideas come from and how do you operate a business and how people live, and you're bringing it back to a country like Turkey, I think you're seeing the results of that happening now with Turkey's tremendous economic growth. And that made me also, when Melek said to me, you're an entrepreneur, it also made me realize that there is something connected between nomads and entrepreneurs. How many people saw the Christmas edition of The Economist? In their article, they talked about the Chinese tourists in Europe. Oh, good, Sean. He used to work at The Economist. Excellent. I'm glad that you are good to your former employers. This article talks about the Chinese flooding Europe and going to Paris and London and Switzerland and going to museums and buying chocolates. And the most interesting thing in that article was that Chinese people don't like chocolates, but they buy them in droves. And the article actually says how this is actually changing European identity and conjuring Europe into a new life and making Europe kind of reinvent itself. But I actually took my experience with cars and this young man who wants to be an inventor, and I thought, no, this is actually how the Chinese are actually helping grow their economy. They're traveling around the world, they're being nomads, and they're collecting ideas and they're interacting with people, because at the end of the day, that's where ideas come from. I think we have this romantic fascination with entrepreneurs as people being, locked up in their rooms and doing things alone. I don't think that's very true. I think entrepreneurs are people who go out and roam around the world and collect ideas and build them by the connections and the interactions that they have. So the million-dollar question is, am I an entrepreneur? I'm not necessarily sure that I'm an entrepreneur. I think there's also a mystique that's put around entrepreneurs, particularly in development, and I think that we need to be careful about how we use that. I think we romanticize the entrepreneur. I think it is really hard work. I think if you see me as somebody observing and traveling the world, I think then yes, you can call me an entrepreneur. But an entrepreneur is also somebody who solves problems and who's inspiring people to actually think and live in a different way. And so maybe in that way I'm an entrepreneur, but I will end my story with going back to my first instinct is, I think an entrepreneur is a unique thing, and I certainly aspire to be that. I definitely know that I am a nomad, but instinctually, I think at the end of the day, what I am is a storyteller, and I very much appreciate you letting me tell mine this evening. Thank you.